Welcome to the 8th episode of With You in Mind. My name's Lisa, the founder of Brain Buddy, and today I'm going to be your host. Before we get started, just a big shout out to our sponsor, the National Brain Appeal, who are the charity that supports the National Hospital for Neurology and Neurosurgery in London. And of course, they're also the sponsors of the With You in Mind podcast. Without them, none of this would be possible. If you don't know who they are or what they do, then do check them out at www.thenationalbrainappeal.org, and you can find out about everything they do on their website. Now today I've got a very, very special guest joining me. I've got Jonathan Hart with me. Jonathan has over 20 years experience in the NHS as a registered nurse working in emergency care, critical care also, with the majority of his time spent in the neurocritical care unit at the National Hospital for Neurology and Neurosurgery. Jonathan has a wealth of experience, and some of the stuff that he's going to share with you is really, really interesting. So, as always, sit back, relax, get yourself a drink, make yourself comfortable. Let's cue that jingle and get this episode started. Okay, welcome, Jonathan. It's great to have you here. How are you doing?
I'm well, thanks. Yep. Come towards the end of the week, another busy week, and looking forward to the weekend.
It's always a good feeling, isn't it? Friday.
Yeah. It's. I think I've already got plans. I think my son's playing rugby, so I'm going to go watch him play Brighton College, and then I think Sunday will just be a rest day for me.
That'll be nice, just to, decompress and I guess process everything that's gone on this week. It's always hard, isn't it? It's why I think start of the year to ease ourselves in. We try to, but it's always like a bit shocking and a bit frazzling initially, I think, anyway.
Yeah, especially after the Christmas period and all that December hype, building up to Christmas, busy shops. Like I was in the other day, the shop, I'm thinking, it's nice to be quiet again, rather than having a massive queue at the till.
Gyms aren't there. I went to the gym the other day. It's absolutely packed, so they're not quiet. Everyone's at the gym, aren't they?
No, that's annoying thing. It's the usual New Year, new me, and to some extent that's fantastic. Some people will keep it up, and the more the merrier, I guess.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
exactly. So look, I've done an intro about you and all of your experience in being an epilepsy nurse. But one of the things I'm really keen to hear myself and for the listeners to hear is what drew you to this sort of like path, this career in supporting people with epilepsy. Where did that come from? That drive?
I finished my A-levels when I was 18, and I took a gap year with a view of going to do physiotherapy. So I went and become an auxiliary nurse or healthcare assistant with my local hospital, and in that time I kind of got a lot of exposure in caring for people with acute illness, and I was observing what the nurses were doing in the hospital, and also the physiotherapists. But I was really drawn to the treatments that and the care that the nurses were providing, and how kind of like involved they were in making people well in conjunction with the medical team. So after the decision, I decided to pursue nursing. I did my 3 years training, after which I went into accident emergency at my local hospital, and I thoroughly enjoyed my time there. And in order to develop more, I moved into the general intensive care. Whilst I've been working in the emergency departments, I've had a lot of exposure in looking after people with a variety of conditions, and in particular people with epilepsy who have come in because of a deterioration in the condition. In some cases they've been in what we call status epilepticus, so I've treated them from an emergency perspective in the A&E, and also my experiences in the intensive care have meant that I've looked after them over a long period of time It's particularly my role at the National Hospital for Neurology and Neurosurgery in the neurocritical care unit, where we looked after people in status for a variety of reasons. And yeah, I then went to UCLH emergency department for a little while before my current job that I'm in now came up. I seen a vacancy, and I felt, with all the experience that I've got in caring for people with epilepsy in an acute setting and in intensive care, I felt it would be beneficial for myself to see and treat people with the condition from an outpatient perspective, especially in terms of being able to talk with them and understand their condition more, because my previous roles have generally involved me and a medical team making decisions on their behalf, because they've not necessarily been in a position to decide it. So yeah, this role has really opened my eyes to the impact that epilepsy can have on individuals, and yeah, I'm kind of passionate now to try and my best to improve myself, and in that respect improve the lives of those with epilepsy as much as possible. And I work in a fantastic hospital such as the National, which is a world-class centre for research and excellence, and I'm learning a lot from the team that I'm with at the moment. So yeah.
Yeah, no, that's fantastic. And like you said, you work in one of the world leading hospitals that specialises in epilepsy. But as lucky as you are to work there, I think they're really lucky to have you with your passion for this subject.
Yeah.
It's really, really, I can hear it in your voice when you talk about it. The passion and desire to help others is definitely there. What I picked up on in what you were saying there was, I feel like you've seen epilepsy in patients in its most severest form through your career, like having worked in accident emergency and the intensive care unit. So you've seen almost like the worst side of epilepsy, the worst seizures that people can have.
Yeah.
But would you just mind explaining sort of the spectrum of epilepsy? So the very mild to, I suppose, the most severe, so that listeners can understand that epilepsy isn't just it doesn't just manifest as one seizure in one way. It's a whole spectrum of different seizures.
Yeah. So some people will probably relate to what I say, and they might experience it not realising, and perhaps what I'll say will be a bit educational in that respect. And generally speaking, there is a variety of epilepsy types, and people will have just absent seizures. Other people have what's called a generalised tonic-clonic seizure, myoclonic jerks, myoclonic seizures, atonic seizures, where people will just fall straight to the floor. So there's a variety of seizures, and in some cases people will also have what's called a vocal seizure with or without awareness, and that can progress to bilateral tonic-clonic seizures. So with a generalised epilepsy, epilepsy onset is very kind of like widespread and variant, and with a vocal epilepsy, it's kind of specific to one region of the brain, and it can spread. So with regards to how that seizures, those seizures can appear and develop, it's some people will experience like what they refer to as a seizure warning or an aura, and they often describe feelings of heightened anxiety, panic. Some people describe a sensation in their stomach that rises. Other people feel like a tingling in one of their limbs, which then progresses. And for some people, that they get that warning, and that can quickly progress to a tonic-clonic seizure. In other people, that warning can progress to an absence where they may or may not be aware. If their seizure experience, they can in some cases feel like they're a bit disorientated, a bit confused. They might not be aware of their surroundings, and that can last for several seconds to minutes. And again, it can progress or to the point that they are completely blank and absent, so they may still be staring, but that people talking to them will not be aware whether or not they can hear or not. And in some cases, they will be able, if they're having a seizure with retained awareness, then they will have some awareness, but they will never be able to respond. But on the outside, they will look like they are completely blank. And as that progresses, if they are completely blank, then they will either could potentially collapse to the floor because of how the absence has progressed, and then have a tonic-clonic seizure, or it can just subside. You've got the tonic-clonic seizure at the severest form, which can progress very rapidly, and then you've got those other kind of absences with or without awareness plus the auras, which is generally can be the kind of spectrum of the seizure.
Fascinating. Thank you so much for explaining that. I never realised myself, as someone who suffers from epilepsy, that there was such a broad spectrum. And there really is, isn't there? I think we often assume, and many people assume, that epilepsy is the most severest form. So what you mentioned there, people fall into the floor and muscle jerking and all of that kind of thing. But it isn't. It can be very, very mild in some cases, and it can manifest as creepy deja vu, as I've heard one gentleman describe his epilepsy.
That's right.
So very, very different.
Yes, and to an extent, that's the one of the challenges is recognition, because everybody associates epilepsy with the severest form, the seizure, the tonic-clonic seizure, the violent shaking of the limbs, and not realising that there are other forms which can go unnoticed. And if someone experiences these symptoms, such as an absence, might not even realise that was a seizure, and can go undiagnosed for years. And even myself, I could be working alongside someone with epilepsy and not realise it, because they could be working away at their computer, and from my perspective look like they're just working away at the computer, touching their mouse or just rubbing their arm, because I would be otherwise unaware. But that individual will be experiencing a seizure, and if I'm, for example, their manager, I could be asking them to do some work, and come back in an hour, it's not been done.
Yeah.
What's happened?
Yeah.
You look like you're working. So in some respects, that's the challenge that people with epilepsy who have experienced the absences and it's not recognised face, because sometimes they don't want to mention it to their employers because of perhaps stigma, concern that it might affect their role, their performance.
One of the things you said there, which I picked up on, was like it can go in some people for many years as an undiagnosed condition, because people just are unfortunately unable to articulate how it feels so that the doctors understand what it is. But I've heard through my chats with patients with epilepsy that sometimes instead of being undiagnosed, they get misdiagnosed. So the majority, the amount of people I've spoken to that have perhaps been prescribed antidepressants, prescribed those kind of pills to alleviate what clinicians sometimes confuse with a mental health condition, because it's not your tonic-clonic seizures, it's more of a mild, weird sensation that people just can't describe.
Our service does what's called a first seizure clinic, and in that service we see people who have had a seizure, and we are investigating to find out the cause of it. And in some cases, some people will have had a seizure following a faint, and that seizure may have occurred because sometimes when somebody faints, the person tries to catch them. And in that respect, it doesn't allow the blood to go back to the head, and sometimes they'll have a shaking episode because of that lack of blood supply to the head. Whereas if they was allowed to just faint, they might not have had the seizure. So some people have collapses which end up manifesting as a seizure, but it's not actually an epileptic seizure,
right?
And it's just a faint. And in other cases, with regards to the mental health side of things. There is what's called a functional seizure, where an individual will experience a seizure secondary to potentially extreme stress, extreme anxiety, extreme trauma, And people who struggle to manage their mental illness or their mental health can have experiences of feeling disorientated, feeling dissociated, that will not be, let's say, if we were to capture that on an EEG, that would not be recognised as an epileptic seizure, and it would probably be associated as a dissociative seizure or functional seizure, non-epileptic seizure. And the treatment of functional seizures tends to be, there can be some medications that may or may not benefit, such as managing the anxiety with antidepressants or antipsychotic medications, and I'd probably say that the mainstay treatment at the moment appears to be CBT, cognitive behavioural therapy, in managing your stresses, managing your anxiety. So you don't start the day at a 12 out of 10.
Yeah.
Because if you start your day at 12 out of time with stress, and then you've still got to go out, and you've still got to go work, you've still got all those pressures, then I would definitely suggest in that respect people to try and embrace cognitive behavioural therapy or any behavioural therapy to help with their mental health.
Of course, yeah.
It's not for everybody, but cognitive behavioural therapy is hard because it's trying to teach you to view things, do things in a way that perhaps you didn't think about before, and it's hard to change.
Well, I don't think it can hurt, can it? I think with epilepsy, again, from my own experience, it's such a uncontrollable condition. There's so much uncertainty associated with it, and I think uncertainty in a lot of people's minds can lead to anxiety naturally. And I think it does. And so I think that's where cognitive behaviour therapy can really come in and work in adjacent as a complementary treatment to epilepsy, as well as, of course, the prescribed medication, which I want to talk about now, actually. So the medications, Jonathan, you've explained the varying types of epilepsy. So when a neurologist or a consultant is prescribing anti-epileptic medication, does it depend on what type of seizure is presenting itself in that individual as to what type of medication they will be prescribed?
Pretty much it does, yeah. So, how we prescribe medications to people with epilepsy is been widely researched, and some members of the team at the national one are, on committees with what's called the National Institute for Centre of Excellence, NICE guidelines, and in that respect, we are looking at diagnosing people with epilepsy, classifying their seizures, so identifying what type of epilepsy they have, and in that context, we are able to prescribe them the right medications. For example, somebody with a generalised tonic-clonic epilepsy would probably require first-line treatment would be sodium valproate. In boys and men and girls under 10, or any woman who's unable to have children, and if, for example, there is a woman above 10 who can have children, then the option would be to have lamotrigine or levetiracetam as the first line. So it very much depends on the type of epilepsy, and at the moment valproate is has been reviewed by the MRHA, the medication board that advises us, and we are currently reviewing the requirement of valproate in men now, because of the kind of like the effects, the potential neurodevelopmental effect it can have on an unborn. But I would still suggest that valproate medication is given, and any kind of like discussions with regards to medications and any concerns with valproate to continue, because valproate is a very effective medication in treating epilepsy.
And for those people that don't know what valproate is, apologies for interrupting there, Jonathan, but that's known as Epilum as well, isn't it?
That's right. Yeah, Epilum. Yeah.
Is it one of the oldest medications now, but to your point, one of the most effective?
Yeah. It's been used in a long time. Yeah. And it's to an extent there are some people who will be of childbearing age, and their epilepsy is so severe that they will still opt to take the treatment. And that's where we do the consent form, the prevent form, to go through the risks and really help the patients make an informed decision.
Yeah.
And then again, if someone's got, for example, a vocal epilepsy with or without evolution to the bilateral tonic-clonic seizure, then some of the first line treatments is something like lamotrigine, levetiracetam, and if unsuccessful, we then look at other alternatives plus add-ons, and we go through the list. And essentially, whether someone stays on a medication after that is, and what happens next is dependent on how effective medication is and whether or not it's tolerable. Yeah. And again, in terms of seizure control, tolerability, and seizure freedom, I guess it's majority of anti-seizure medications come with side effects, and the management of the side effects is one of our kind of like balances that we discuss with patients. And some people are tolerate medications better than others. Others experience are more sensitive to medications. So there's there's a large variety of how medication is tolerated, and it's difficult to determine why some people tolerate it more than others. But yeah, it's a challenge, but it's something that we do manage. And when we are starting medications, I tend to always encourage the patient as much as possible, persevere with this medication, because this is an option here. It could be one of your last options, or it could have been one of your previous options. In some cases, I wouldn't say don't try a previous medication, because if you didn't tolerate medication before, it might be because your previous medication, let's say, burden was a bit different. So tolerance is very much a challenge with the medications. But if someone can persevere with the medication, then it's to their benefit as much as possible.
Of course, yeah. I think it's really interesting what you say about the side effects of these drugs. I've taken a number of anti-epileptic drugs in my time, and the side effects have been very different from one versus another, and also compared to other people that are taking the same drug. I remember I had the worst experience with a drug called lamotrigine. Yeah, I had a really, really horrific experience where it was just like I was taking speed, and I was up all night. I just literally couldn't sleep, so I quickly came off that drug.
Yeah, I do hear people saying that one can affect their sleep. Yeah.
Yeah, interesting. People's experiences of these drugs, and we're all different. We're all going to have different tolerance levels. One thing I wanted to ask you, talking about tolerance levels, we quite often hear about people with epilepsy having taken a drug for a number of years, and it's been really effective, it's working, it's controlling the seizures to a manageable condition, and then it starts not to work and becomes so effective. How much of that is down to us as humans and our neurobiology getting used to that drug and therefore it not being as effective as it once was? Is that a thing?
I do experience a lot of individuals mentioning that, this medication has made me seizure free for 8 years, and then suddenly they might start experiencing the auras or the absences before the tonic-clonics. And I find that if someone is, let's say, in some cases enabled to, if their condition is recognised at early stage and they're treated as soon as possible, the chance of seizure freedom is relatively high. And the longer somebody has epilepsy and it remains uncontrolled, those pathways that enable the epilepsy, the seizures to occur, are fairly well established. And you can start a medication to help with the seizure control, and it can be fantastic, and somehow the body finds a way of rerouting those pathways to enable the seizure. We've got millions of nerve cells, and it's something that is reported a lot, and to some extent it's not surprising, because for example, when somebody has a stroke affecting their right side of their head and they can't move their left arm, they at some point they start to move the arm again, because they start that brain being damaged. Those pathways then re-establish, and with physiotherapy they can move it again. So unfortunately, it works in the opposite way of epilepsy. You manage to take a medication to help control the seizures, but those pathways do re-emerge. And again, why that happens, it's, I guess, very, very widely under research.
That's really interesting, though, isn't it? The brain is such a clever organ that it can find a way around the medication to make the epilepsy present itself again. Continuing with the theme, I think, of medication, what I've also heard as well is people that take certain medications and then perhaps the brand of that medication changes, and they'll from that start to experience epilepsy again, or seizures coming through just because of the brand of medication has changed. Is that something that you've come across before?
So yeah, I do find individuals do mention that when they take a different brand, I'd say in most cases they are affected by side effects. I'd say the brand, the medication in most cases is still effective. The seizures are still controlled, but the side effects are less tolerable. So, for example, if somebody takes a different version of levetiracetam brand, in particular, that's one that springs to mind. They can experience a bit more deterioration in their mood and become a bit more irritable, a bit more angry. And yeah, in other medications such as maybe clobazam, some people have reported when they take that in a different form that they have experienced increase in their seizures. And again, yeah, there's potentially substances in those that, I'm not pharmaceutical. I'm not fully aware of what's in the products, but people do report it, and as much as possible we strongly encourage GPs to prescribe the same brand that individual is tolerating and gets on with and is effective. So yeah, whenever someone contacts us with that issue, we very much ask the GP to facilitate it as much as possible.
And that's something patients can request as well, isn't it, to stay on brand, i.e. stick with the pharmaceutical provider who's manufacturing those products and stay on brand.
Yeah.
Fantastic, thank you. So we've talked a lot about the particular medications that can support people with epilepsy. In your opinion and with your experience, what lifestyle changes or implementations can people make that will really help and encourage and support their epilepsy?
So yeah, with regards to lifestyle factors, I strongly encourage the people I speak to recognise what triggers your seizures. Are there things that you can self-manage that will make your seizures better rather than you needing to take more medication? For example, some people recognise that tiredness is a big factor. So as much as possible, ensure good sleep hygiene, good sleep routine, avoid certain late night activities which is just going to affect your ability to sleep. Some people will recognise that light is a factor that can trigger seizures, so they'll tend to go out with their sunglasses on. With regards to alcohol, if alcohol is something that definitely triggers, I'd probably say alcohol is a significant seizure trigger, and as much as possible, if you identify that or if your seizures are not very well controlled, then consider reducing alcohol consumption. Other factors that other things that I would suggest is exercise and also I'd say not overdoing things. Exercise, but don't over exercise. Carry on working if you can work, but don't overwork. Recognise when you're getting tired doing an activity at work, because some people do find that their seizures can be triggered during sustained periods of concentration, and if you recognise that is the case, so if you recognise that after 45 minutes of sustained concentration you might have a seizure, then reduce that length or whatever you identify. Give yourself some mini breaks, and if you've got a manager or an employer, then have a word with them. Be a bit more open about your condition so that they can support you.
That's really good advice. I think recognizing the triggers is a really, really interesting one, because again, the triggers can be so different. I mean, I think some of
Yeah,
them will be the same: sleep, good diet, exercise. They're the things that we all need, right, to thrive and to be well. But with epilepsy, there are little varying ones, I think, that different people will need.
yeah,
And what I'd encourage, and I don't know whether you'd agree, is keeping some sort of diary to understand perhaps what is the trigger, what makes you have seizures at certain times. For me, it was a weird one. It was when I used to do mathematical equations, and too many of them. And I noticed that because I worked in a bank, and when I've moved away from it, they just seem to calm down a bit. And it's because when I spoke to my neurologist, my epilepsy was emanating from an area that was in and around the area of the brain that was responsible for mathematical equations. So we're all just so different, aren't we, in our journey of epilepsy?
that's right. Yeah, yeah. I've spoken to a few people who work in computers, and when they're doing these fine, like one chap has the seizures become an issue when he's trying to put a keyboard together. So he's doing fine, minute stuff, and he'll have a myoclonic jerk when, and then, yeah, during sustained period of doing that little bits of work, it becomes an issue. So, and again, when something starts affecting your work, you can get a bit concerned about it and a bit
Yeah,
stressed, and then that can build and build and build and make the situation worse. So that's why I say just take a moment and stop
yeah.
and rest, and because sometimes just having that moment is enough to prevent things in some occasions.
I think you're absolutely right. I think perhaps one of the reasons that people don't is because, I don't know whether so much now, but certainly years ago, there was stigma associated with epilepsy. And I think people, and I was even told when I was younger, don't expect too much from your life. Don't compare it to your friends, because you won't achieve as much as they can with your epilepsy. And so I think there's almost an innate behavior with people with epilepsy where they want to prove everyone else wrong, and themselves as well. They just want to keep on going and persevering and being resilient and ignoring the warning signs. So I think that's the thing as well with people with epilepsy. And so what would you say to those people that have grown up with that stigma, that belief perhaps that epilepsy will prevent them from doing things, and so they have this stoic attitude of keep going? What would you say to those in terms of being kinder to themselves?
Yeah, I would just encourage them to recognize their value that they bring, you know. And it's very important that you stay in touch with people. You don't isolate yourself. Don't be embarrassed by your condition, and being open. You'd be surprised at how many people would be willing to help.
I mean, people still struggle, don't they, to tell their employer and even friends and family members about their condition, because they perhaps don't understand it themselves. But I think with epilepsy, communication is everything. So would you encourage the communication within, like, work, within friends and family members, of explaining how the person with epilepsy is feeling? Would you always encourage that?
Yeah, I would definitely encourage it. It's something that I suggest to the individuals when I'm speaking to them in clinic, and I'm often writing supporting letters to enable them to speak to their managers, to ask their management to perhaps refer to occupational health so that they can be given flexible working adjustments or reasonable adjustments. For example, like we mentioned earlier, having more frequent breaks. If you're a bit open about your condition, people will be a bit more understanding as to why you might not have got that work done that they was expecting to be completed. I think it's very important that individuals with epilepsy are open about their condition so that it raises awareness. And epilepsy is not just associated with the severest form. And by remaining in work, by remaining in contact with society, you are demonstrating what you're capable of. And I speak to so many people that are desperate to stay in employment, and they want to work. They don't want to not work. And when they experience stresses at work, or they are under pressure by their manager, or they have got an unsupportive manager. That in turn leads to a lot of anxiety, a lot of stress, which then increases seizures. That person then loses their job and their financial support. So it's very important for the individual to be very open, but it's also extremely important that the employers are supportive of their employees with epilepsy, so that they can stay in employment and they can progress in their career. And to an extent, maybe government need to be a bit more, I say, maybe perhaps a few more government legislations which will enable businesses to employ people with epilepsy if it's required. Yeah.
Absolutely. I mean, the conditions, is it? I'm assuming it's under the Disability Discrimination Act currently, is it?
Yeah, it is. So reasonable adjustments should be made, yeah. And to an extent, I don't know how many private firms do have occupational health, but they should have those facilities. But yeah, I'll probably say there's too many people I speak to that don't have access to that and need it. Hence why I will send a supporting letter, but cannot guarantee where it will go. I know some supporting letters have still meant that person's lost their job, and it's sad because I just see the individual in some ways deteriorating because of some of the things that have unfortunately happened with their careers. At the same time, epilepsy, the importance of taking medication in epilepsy is so that we can control the seizures. If we don't achieve seizure freedom, we are controlling the seizures so that the long-term effects associated with epilepsy, i.e. the cognitive effects that can impact on someone, for example, their memory, their cognitive abilities. Epilepsy causes like short-term lapses in it, but as well, over the long term, memory becomes, I'll probably say memory is the biggest issue that I hear people complain of, especially the longer that they have it. And some medicines may exacerbate the memory, but still the underlying cause is the epilepsy and the control of it. And again, when it comes to seizure control, some people tolerate it better than others. And I find that in particular with the elderly and individuals with learning disabilities or any difficulties with communicating. Because if I'm going to speak to a person in clinic who can converse with me very well, they are very good at articulating what they experience. So they might be somebody who had a tonic-clonic seizure and they've got this medication which is very effective. It either stops their tonic-clonic seizures altogether and they don't have experienced anything. Other people will take medication for their tonic-clonic seizure and they start to experience, like I mentioned earlier, a reduction in the tonic-clonics, but they might have a few more absences. And they'll say, I never had an absence before. And so some people will experience new seizure feelings post taking medication. And some people can say that, right, I'm experiencing less seizures, but I'm feeling a bit more anxious, or I'm feeling a bit more heightened anxiety, I'm having fluctuations in it a bit more often. And in some cases, more medicine can help that. And in some cases, if somebody's on a lot of medications on max treatment, they can literally be stuck there and stuck in a period of having fluctuations in their auras. And if you've got someone like that who can't tell you what they're going through, like somebody with epilepsy, with learning disabilities, or an elderly patient with dementia or cognitive decline, that will probably be demonstrated or visualised in behavioural issues. They will become a bit more uptight, a bit more stressed, and that becomes a bit of a challenge to make because, again, the worsening behaviour becomes associated with the anti-seizure medication, when it might not be.
Makes sense, doesn't it? So I think what I'm hearing from what you've said just there is communication with your clinician, with your neurologist is also key, because epilepsy changes. We know that from what you said earlier, you might have been on one drug for a number of years, which could be working perfectly fine, and then the epilepsy will find a way to manifest itself again, because the brain's a clever thing. So it's just about that contingent process of communicating with your neurologist about your medication, how you're feeling, maybe keeping a diary, and just keeping connected with people around you. Because it can be a very isolating condition, can't it, epilepsy?
Yeah.
I certainly found it very isolating in my younger years, before I discovered charities like Epilepsy Society and various other ones. But what would you say to people, Jonathan, that have epilepsy and are feeling perhaps isolated at the moment, or like there is no hope for them? What would you say to those people?
At a personal level and a professional level, speaking from somebody who has their, or I have my own, health issues, which in some cases has same fluctuations that can be worsened by the same triggers of epilepsy. So I'd say to individuals that recognize your worth. You are a very important person, and you might not realize it. But I'll just I make reference to like two films. One film is a film called It's a Wonderful Life. It's a Christmas movie, and it's about a chap who he feels suicidal, and he's basically touched by an angel, and that angel allows him to see his life if he wasn't in it, if he wasn't in that, if he wasn't around, he got to see what other people's lives were without him. So in this case, he saved his young brother's life when he fell into a lake, and his brother went on to be a World War II bomber who saved a lot of British people, so saved 20,000 people. And when he's seen his life without him being around, obviously his brother wasn't there because his brother died in the lake. So your presence, as little as you feel like you have, is important and can have a profound impact beyond you can ever know. So you being around means that your mum or dad is is able to do what they do, and that is love you, care for you. Your loved ones think a lot of you. So and another film that I've kind of like to make reference to is The Sound of Metal, and this is a film on Amazon Prime, and that film is based on a drummer who becomes deaf. In that film, he's struggling to come to terms with becoming deaf, and he's doing everything he can to hear again. He wants to hear again, and he saves up this money to get himself a device so that he can hear, and it isn't what he expected. And when you're listening to what he can hear, it sounds dreadful, sounds awful, and he himself absolutely hates it. And it gets to a point in the film where he switches it off, and everything is quiet. And I just felt I've never loved peace and quiet so much. And I'd say for that is acceptance. Accept what you have. Make the most of each day, because no matter how bad you think your epilepsy is, there's probably someone who's got it worse right now. And make the most of each day, and don't get yourself concerned and uptight about what's going to happen if I take this medication, or not. Sometimes if you get yourself uptight and anxious about what's going to happen with side effects, you end up stuck. And if you are able to, focus on a day at a time, right, I'll take this medication today and I've tolerated it, fantastic. I'll take it tomorrow, no problems. Take it 2 weeks later, you're continuing on a day-to-day basis, and you can keep, when you think to yourself, I've got these side effects, I'm going to have these forever, it does become, I don't want this medication anymore. So if you can, take a day at a time, accept the condition, and acknowledge that I might not be seizure free, or I have got seizure freedom, and appreciate where you are with it, and make the most of it.
I think that's great advice you've just given there, Jonathan, with some great recommendations for two very profound films. Only one of those I've seen, so I think tonight I might watch the drummer one. I've heard really good things about that film. Just finally, before you go, because I know I'm keeping you, In terms of the resources and support that people can get from either yourself, your team, or anywhere else in the country, what would you say the main resources and support areas would be?
Okay, in terms of the service that we run, we have an advice line, which we've got one advice line which our secretary is manning for us. We've made some adjustments in trying to improve access to our services, and I hope some of those adjustments are felt by the patients that I care of, and obviously bear in mind that we are continuing to try and improve it, and we are prioritising people the most urgent, and so in terms of the services that we provide, we've got our advice line. Outside of us, you've got the epilepsy charities that provide support for individuals who want to discuss their condition. If somebody's ever feeling really low in their mood, they have suicidal thoughts, there's the Samaritans, there's the Mind charities to contact. And again, if really struggling, you can contact our advice line. Yes, support groups try to link in with people who also have their condition to identify ways that they're managing their condition, which might help you.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of value in connecting with people that might be going through a similar experience with the condition. Well, Jonathan, thank you so much. It's honestly been a pleasure. I've learned so much from you. I learned so much from you last time as well, and I could literally talk to you all day. So thank you. Honestly, I think people are going to get a lot from this.
It's a pleasure.
Oh, goodness me, what a knowledgeable guy. It was an absolute pleasure to interview Jonathan and hear all about the work he does to support people with epilepsy. Hope you enjoyed it. Take care and tune in next time when I'll be joined by another special guest.